The Lowdown, with economist and political strategist Elson Low.
Good evening and welcome to the Lowdown. It's good to have you here with us tonight. We're going to be talking about some interesting things tonight. I know I always say they're interesting, but that's because they always are. So thank you for joining us here on the Lowdown. My name is Elson Low. Thank you for starting your Saturday night on a high with Elson Low. I always have to check and see if this is a Saturday or a Tuesday. Folks, we're actually going to be moving the Tuesday show to Monday to facilitate a slight scheduling issue. So you can look forward to the Lowdown on Saturdays and Mondays from 7 to 8. However, just as a slight tweak, we are not actually going to be having the show. We may not, or I think we're not going to have the show on Monday, this coming Monday. So this will actually begin from the following week. This new schedule will begin from the following week. So that's just something we wanted to make you aware of. Folks, welcome to the Lowdown. Always good to have you here. Let's have a fun, entertaining, exciting, interesting show. We've got, of course, our memes of the week. We've got we're going to talk a bit about GPL, or as Guyanese have come to term it, GP Hell, which is what it really is. So we're going to talk a bit about education system, interesting things, and we're going to talk about that. It's the oil and gas expenses that we're still to hear about. This audit is supposed to have already come out this month, but we've not heard anything about it. So we're going to talk a bit about that. Very important issues. Share the link. Let's bring everyone into the show. Let's give everyone a chance to enjoy the show. Let's bring everyone in. As always, we're looking to have a fun time. We're looking to have an entertaining and interesting time. We're looking to inform, but we're also looking to keep things light where we can. And so share the link. Let's give everyone a chance to see the show. If you're interested as well in donating to the PNCR or to the show, you can donate via Cash App at $ Aubrey Norton GY, capital A, capital N, capital GY. So that's in your top corner there. You can see in bright green that you can donate via Cash App, $ Aubrey Norton GY, capital A, capital N, capital GY. So thank you very much. Of course, anything you can provide us really is much appreciated as we continue to bring you updates, as we continue to bring you information, as we continue to help you to understand the policies and ideas of the coalition, of the PNCR, of the APNU, as we continue to work to move Guyana forward, and as of course we continue to call out a lot of the nonsense that the government loves to do. So share the link, folks. Share the link. If you can contribute, we'd much appreciate it. And we're gonna keep rolling on into tonight's show. As I mentioned, we're gonna cover a couple of topics. We're going to cover first of all the electricity situation. We've already spoken a bit about this, but we're going to cover it again in the context of the press conference that we had, in the context of some of the other comments that have come out, and in the context of understanding that the electricity problem in Guyana is not exclusive to the Demerara-Berbice interconnected system, the DBIS. It's not exclusive to that, but rather there are many areas that are very difficult, that have great problems associated with them. So we're going to talk about all of those as we go forward. So share the link, folks. Share the link. Let's give everyone a chance to be here with us tonight. Let's give everyone a chance to be on. Welcome to the Lowdown. It's always fun to be on with you guys. It's always entertaining, and we'll be happy to chat with you about some of the other entertaining, interesting, strange things that we're hearing. We've got a report from the Ministry of Education that some students have been writing golf at CXC. So we're gonna get into those things in a minute, viewers. Strange things, but we're gonna get into it in a minute. That we're also gonna talk, as we mentioned, a little bit about this audit of Exxon's expenses, which is a strange one that we haven't heard anything about this audit. There's a lot of things we're not hearing anything about. We're not hearing anything about the auction of the remaining oil blocks as well. Pretty strange, folks. So let's share the link. Share the link. Let's give everyone a chance to see the show, and then we'll get rolling right in. We've got some fun and funny things for you tonight. We've got some fun and funny things for you tonight. On that note, let's start rolling with the first slide here. Let's get the show on the road. There we go. This is something that the Minister of Education was saying. A total of 116 students from 6 secondary schools wrote golf at CSEC. When I first saw this, I thought I'd misread it, but no, this is the case. 88% received a 1, while 22% received a 2. Well, the first thing we'd say is congratulations to the students who wrote golf at CXC. I mean, they did quite well, so congratulations are in order. Definitely. And the other thing we'd say is, of course, we want students to be able to expand as much as possible their horizons and to be able to study whatever it is that they'd like to study, whatever it is that they have a particular interest in. But it is, I think, a little bit ironic and tone deaf that the ministry is talking about golf, students taking golf at CSEC. When we've spoken at length on this show about the performance of the country at math, and if we could bring that slide up again, just to point something interesting out to you viewers, just to point something interesting out. So we've got 88% received a 1, while 22% received a 2. So that means that 100% of the people who wrote golf passed. But of course, in math, 34% passed. So you mean to tell me that we've got golf being offered and everybody is passing with something as important as mathematics? Only 34% is passing. And in fact, the vast majority of people in the country are not passing. Very interesting, folks. Again, I didn't know that they offered golf at CSEC. Of course, I'm glad that children are getting opportunities to study a wide variety of things. I just think it might be a little bit tone deaf for the ministry to be highlighting something like that. Especially in this context, I think that's probably a little bit off. And one of the other things I'd say is, I recall when we heard that students got 27 passes at CSEC. I remember asking a couple of people and myself as well. I'm not sure that I can name 27 subjects. I mean, we can try, but I'm not sure that I can name 27 subjects. I think I did 12. So this person did twice as many as I did. More than twice as many as I did. And I did quite 12 is quite a lot, right? So very interesting. 27 subjects person did. At the same time, the pass rate in math is 34%, meaning that in excess of 60% of the people who wrote the exam didn't pass. About 2/3 of the people who wrote the exam didn't pass. And that's not accounting for all the people who dropped out before they even got to that stage, which we've discussed on the show before, where it's roughly about 80% of Guyana's population that doesn't have math and English passes. Roughly that. So yeah, very interesting. We got a 100% pass rate for golf, and we got 34% pass rate for math. Interesting. I thought, viewers, don't you find that to be fascinating? I find that to be fascinating. Viewers, I don't know what's going on in this country sometimes. It's pretty unbelievable. It's pretty unbelievable. So there you go. That's one that I thought that you might find interesting, entertaining, hilarious. But at the same time, we don't want to say that we don't want students to have the opportunity to ride golf if they want to ride golf. More subjects, the merrier in terms of variety, even though I do think that really, I don't think students should really write more than maybe 15 at the most. And I'm just going to give you a quick hint in case you're not aware, but it will not help you to get into college in the States and so on if you have 20-something subjects. You have to have the appropriate extracurriculars and those types of things to be a rounded student. So having a lot of subjects is, it's a fun exercise. Unclear whether it's really useful in terms of getting into further study and those types of things. But I guess you learn a lot from the other subjects. Golf could be one of the subjects. I'm not sure. I don't know enough about CSEC golf to comment. Let me say that. Let me say that. And let me leave it at that. Okay, folks. So that's the first interesting, entertaining thing we wanted to talk about tonight. But let's jump over to the next slide as we continue the discussion. Okay, so we've talked about housing in Guyana for a bit. We've talked about how the housing market is confusing, strange, unusual, unbelievable one. And now we've seen someone posting for rent in Windsor Estates. Great name, Windsor Estates. We'll forgive the fact that they misspelled bedrooms, folks. Let's forgive that. It could easily happen to anyone. But I don't know if you noticed this, but it's right there, $900,000 for 3 bedrooms. $900,000 for 3 bedrooms. Now, unless my memory, my math is off or something, isn't that $300,000 per bedroom? $300,000 per bedroom. $300,000 per bedroom. Wow. That's pretty stunning, right? A 3 bedroom house is not a very big house. It's a little bit bigger than a small size house, but it's not a big house. $900,000 for that particular property. $900,000. $300,000 per bedroom. This is seeing these types of rents, these types of properties really highlights what we've been talking about, which is that there's a significant issue with inequality. It's a significant issue with inequality in this country. And we in the PNCR, and we in the coalition more broadly, believe that it is an issue that needs to be addressed. We believe that it needs to be addressed. We don't think that we should just ignore inequality, ignore the fact that for an average Guyanese, this is totally out of reach, and we would want even well-to-do Guyanese. I think this is very expensive, so that's related to the oil and gas sector. But of course, there must be Guyanese who own these buildings, and therefore they have become, at least in terms of the price of their assets, the house, very wealthy from that perspective. So from that, we also want to keep in mind that as much as that's a good thing, we want to ensure that everyone is able to have these opportunities. That's a very important thing. It shouldn't only be people from a certain background who are able to have these opportunities. I myself, I don't ever claim not to be from a background of privilege. But what I'd say is that I think it's important to advocate for people who do need assistance, who do need help, who can't afford these types of properties. Not that I can afford this, folks. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong, folks. Not that I can afford a $900,000 a month rent. I'm not living that life, folks. But it's definitely interesting, and I'll put it this way. Really, young people must ask themselves the question: can young people in Guyana afford to purchase a home in Georgetown or in any of a really nice neighborhood in the city, or even a relatively decent neighborhood? I saw a land selling in Kitty for $47 million, just the land. And I saw another one selling for $40 million. So that I think raises some serious questions about whether the government is doing enough to redistribute, doing enough for low-income housing to assist people. We've seen 100 houses here, 100 houses there. 400 houses is the most I think I've seen. Folks, 100 houses here, 100 houses there is not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. Exxon hired 3,500 workers this year alone, and they're going to continue hiring as they expand their production. So just having a very small number of houses being built for low-income families, at least you need to keep pace with everyone that Exxon hires. Really, once they're within a reasonable salary scale, will want their own house, and that will displace probably 4 people in Region 4. That's what the statistics indicate. About 4 people will be displaced every time someone from Exxon wants a house, or from any of the other oil and gas surface companies, or the other companies that are exploring for oil in Guyana. So let's not single out Exxon here. They're just one company. But that is essentially the case across the board. And so as a result of that, what you're going to see is a lot of displacement of people in Region 4. That explains these high rents, high property values. The question is, what is the government doing, and is it doing enough to address these issues? We must also keep in mind that as much as the government has said that they're going to do a lot for house lots and whatnot, we've had tens of thousands of Venezuelans move to Guyana, and so that has also eaten up a lot of the housing stock. So it is not, I think, a problem that can be approached lightly. Not a problem that can be approached lightly, even though we must admit that it's pretty entertaining to see a house selling for a house renting for $900,000. It's only a 3-bedroom, which means that it's $300,000 per bedroom. Wow. I mean, I guess it has all the amenities, but still, $300,000 per bedroom. This is Guyana or this is Manhattan? Woo! Anyway, viewers, we gotta keep rolling on. We gotta keep those memes rolling on. We gotta keep the conversation going. So let's get the next one up, and as we continue here. Blackout 3 times for the morning. GP hell. I think pretty much every Guyanese can relate to this. I think everybody has had this experience almost lately. Rough. What is going on? 3 times in the morning. You can see this person is very, very frustrated. Look at all the L's in that GP hell. Look at that fire. It looks very hot. So yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. And we addressed this at our last press conference. I'll get into a bit of what we said in a minute. But let's get the next meme up here as we continue to go along. GPL Inc. is the best at ruining weekends. I'm sorry that your weekend was ruined. That's tough. I don't know what happened. It sounds like you had some plans and maybe you couldn't iron your clothes. You couldn't go and bathe because GPL, the current cut off, the water cut off. Maybe you couldn't boil your tea to drink in the morning. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I completely understand people's frustration. I think we all understand people's frustration. I think it's very reasonable frustration. Let's go over to the next slide, because we got more of these. So we have MP Rita Fernandez, and she's saying F in fairy lights, GP hell. Yeah, fairy lights. Let's start with F. And on, off. Oof. That's a tough one. I think the MP is very, very frustrated. I know that I am very frustrated. I know every Guyanese is frustrated. GP hell. So from that perspective, let's talk a bit about what we spoke about at the press conference, where we highlighted the fact that Guyanese now refer to GPL as GP hell, because it is nothing but the truth. So we had to highlight that. But one of the things we indicated is that there's no excuse for the government to really now having all of these resources to be tolerating this level of blackouts. There's no excuse to have this level of blackouts. And so what needs to happen is that there needs to be deliberate efforts taken, deliberate efforts to actually deal with the electricity problem. That's what needs to happen, deliberate efforts. If we don't have deliberate efforts, if we don't make this a key focus, then we're going to continue to have these blackouts, and that would be, to my mind, utterly ridiculous. What we also took care to point out is that we're spending, or it looks like we're spending so far, $2 billion US on additional power generation. That's the gas to shore pipeline as well as the gas to shore plant. Right? So $2 billion US is going to be spent there. Huge amount. But there's been almost no conversation around what we're going to spend to upgrade, to maintain, to improve the current grid that's distributing that same additional energy, additional electricity that the gas to shore project will generate. And so what we would want to say, which is something that it seems utterly absurd that we have to even talk about this, but can you imagine that the government is going to build all of this additional power capacity? Can you imagine this? And the government is not going to do anything about the grid, the faulty grid that causes all the problems or causes endless blackouts, the faulty grid, the system that creates so much frustration. I mean, it boggles the mind. You really are gonna leave it like that? That's the plan, to leave it like that? uh, Unbelievable, right? So the plan is just generate more electricity and leave the grid as it is. One of the things we pointed out at the press conference is that last year, Jack mentioned, we're doing a study, we're addressing the issues. And by next year, we're going to expect that we're not going to have as many blackouts. And, and you have, I think it was last weekend was 3. And then the last few days, people are getting blackout multiple times in the day. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? That's what they said almost exactly a year ago. That, doing these studies, upgrade these systems, do everything. Stop these blackouts. No progress. Or at least not the type of progress that we're looking for. Can you imagine that that's what's been going on? GP, hell, we're really going to go and spend, viewers, $2 billion US to generate new electricity. Gas to show pipeline, gas fire power station. And we're going to leave the system like this so that you're producing all this electricity and you still get a blackout. Here's another thing that's interesting about this. One of the arguments for the production of additional electricity and cheaper electricity is that it will be good for the manufacturing sector, it will drive jobs and so on. Okay, great. But it strikes me that if there's unreliable electricity distribution, so you have lots of blackouts, businesses will not really be able to benefit from the cheaper energy anyway. Right? They still need to use energy. And so they'll have to buy these expensive electricity, these expensive generator backup systems, which don't produce energy efficiently. And so therefore, they're paying pretty much the same cost or a higher cost. Plus, of course, they've got to go and purchase the generators, which are themselves very expensive. Some of the generators could be $20 million, $30 million. So businesses have to go and do all of that in order to have stable electricity. All of that in order to have stable electricity. Can you imagine? Can you imagine all of that to have stable electricity? And at the same time, we're spending $2 billion on a new electricity generation. Not fixing the current problem, but spending an additional $2 billion. What in the world? What in the world, you have to ask yourself, is going on? That's beyond belief. Absolutely beyond belief. But that is what we're confronting, which is why we're saying that we need to treat new electricity generation with the same urgency, that we treat upgrading and maintaining the grid. And we made several suggestions regarding that. What we're going to do, viewers, is we're going to lean into just a short video right now, just to give you some of the basic background on some of these electricity issues. What it is you're looking for in a stable grid, why you get these blackouts. And then we're going to come back and give you some perspective on, 1, what actions the coalition took to deal with the blackout issue, and 2, what actions we're continuing to recommend to be done in order to mitigate these issues. And you'll see that just from a basic understanding of the blackout problem, that the things we're suggesting are very much what really should be done. So let's get that on, and we'll see you again on the other side of it in a couple of minutes there, viewers.
Usually think of the power grid in terms of its visible parts, power plants, high voltage lines, and substations, but much of the complexity of the power grid comes in how we protect it when things go wrong. Because of the importance of electricity in our modern world, it's critical that we're able to prevent damage to equipment and perform repairs quickly when they're needed. The grid got its name for a reason. It's an interconnected system, which means that if we're not careful, small problems can sometimes ripple out and impact much larger areas. So, its protective systems are thoughtfully designed to work together and minimize the number of people affected when faults occur. Hey, I'm Grady, and this is Practical Engineering. On today's episode, we're talking about power systems protection and how blackouts work. This video is sponsored by HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Get started with 9 free meals at HelloFresh.com by using code PRACTICAL9 at checkout. More on that later. Things go wrong on the grid all the time. Just like a car or the device you're watching this video on right now, the grid is a machine. It's a big machine that sits out in all kinds of weather, exposed to a wide variety of meddling and destructive animal species, and just the general wear and tear of providing humanity with an absolutely essential yet extremely dangerous amenity: electricity. It shouldn't come as a surprise that faults happen from time to time. One common type of fault on transmission lines comes from sagging. During peak demands, these lines move tremendous amounts of electricity as electrical current. Well, no wire is a perfect conductor. They all have some resistance. So the more current you try to pass through a wire, the less efficiently it works. That energy that doesn't make it to the end of the line is instead lost as heat. And what does heat do to metal? It causes it to expand. So the lines get longer, which means they sag lower, and occasionally that brings them into contact with tree limbs, creating a path to ground and shorting out the line. So what happens during a short circuit? Electricity will take any path to ground that it can find, and the lower resistance of the path, the more current that will flow. A short circuit is when a low resistance path to ground happens where it's not supposed to, bypassing customers and literally shortening the circuit. This has a number of unwanted consequences. All that energy is being wasted for one, arcs created by short circuits can start fires for two, but more importantly, faults create massive spikes in current that can overload and damage equipment on the grid. I probably don't need to mention that most pieces of the power grid are expensive. They take a long time to install and repair, and they're important. They're providing an essential utility, so we don't want them to get damaged. Easy enough, you might be thinking, just make them strong. Put all the power lines underground where they're protected from weather and animals, make them as big as bridge suspension cables and use indestructible alloys, put all the substations in big concrete buildings, hide the solar panels under the ocean. You see what I'm getting at? I don't know how much a car that never breaks down would cost, but I'm sure that I wouldn't want to pay for it, and the same is generally true for the power grid. Resiliency doesn't just mean durability, it's a balancing act between making our infrastructure strong enough to resist threats, keeping faults from creating further damage, and making it easy to diagnose and repair problems so that equipment can be brought back online with minimal downtime. Those last two items are the job of power system protection engineers and can be summed up pretty easily in one word: isolate. Engineers establish zones of protection around each major piece of the power grid to isolate faults and make them easy to find and repair. You can trace these zones of protection from your house all the way to the power plant. A short circuit in your coffee maker isn't going to overload the service transformer because there's a fuse or breaker in between. If a car knocks down a pole and grounds out a line, that's not going to take out the entire substation, again because it's isolated with a fuse or breaker. If a transformer has a fault in a substation, it's not going to melt the transmission lines feeding it because it can be isolated using breakers. And if a transmission line sags into a tree limb, the resulting surge in current is not going to destroy the generator at the power plant because it has its own zone of protection. Of course, this is a super simplified explanation. These zones of protection are thoughtfully considered to balance the complexity and resiliency of the grid. But how do they actually work? There are a wide variety of types of electrical faults. Identifying and differentiating them can be a major challenge. The fundamentals of electrical devices can be boiled down pretty easily. Electrical current.
All right, viewers, thank you for just taking a quick look at that. Thank you for just taking a quick look to give you a sense of the issue, a sense of what causes blackouts. Of course, you're going to have trees and other things that interrupt the lines. You're going to have things that may fly into the lines. You're going to have weather and its impact on the lines. You're going to have one thing that was mentioned to me is people may have workshops that consume a large amount of electricity, and that can cause the lines nearby the transformer, I believe, to blow. Now, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but this is just a general understanding of it. One of the things that's important, I think, was importantly noted, is the idea of zones and of kind of having only localized specific areas that suffer from electricity problems rather than the entire area. One of the problems we've got with the DBIS is that if any particular area is, any particularly critical area is hit, you can have electricity down right across Demerara, right across the Demerara and Berbice regions, which is, to my mind, wholly absurd. And we mentioned on a previous show, it's about $80 million worth of damage every single time that happens, if you look at the actual workforce. It's a bit more if you look at all the people that living in the area, because about 400,000 people that live in this area, maybe a little bit more. But in terms of the workforce, in excess of 200,000 people that would be affected by a big event like that. And you'd say, oh, that must be rare. Folks, that's the opposite of rare. Whatever the opposite of rare is, that's what that is, because we've seen that happen too many times. We have massive blackouts across huge stretches of the country. We've seen that so many times. So it's a really unfortunate thing. But what I think it says is that we need to, as much as possible, focus on ensuring that damage is limited and that there's backup systems in place. And so what we wanted to relate out of our last press conference is that it's important for there to be redundancies. That's to say, it's not just one cord that you're relying on to carry electricity. So that if something happens to it, you can rely on the other power cord, the other electricity infrastructure to carry it instead. So that if a truck slams into a post, you have another line that can carry the electricity instead, and then that would be a way that you can avoid having, maybe you won't be able to avoid the blackout altogether, but you can avoid having a substantial issue. That's really the key. You want to avoid having a substantial issue. And so that is kind of the thinking behind it. But there's also another thing that we want to really make sure that we mention, which is that, it's also important to upgrade. It's also important to upgrade as much as possible the system to ensure that the transformers and the lines and so on can themselves operate in a way to isolate these power surges, so that you don't have, as the person was saying in the video, you plug in your toaster oven and it shorts the whole system. Really, the example in Guyana is that another one that was mentioned, somebody's doing construction in their street with an excavator, and they hit a post or hit a pole or something, and then it cuts down the whole system. You don't want that to be the case at all. And so what we did to help to deal with these sorts of things, I'll give you some sense of it. The coalition actually replaced 87,717 service lines, power lines. 87,000. Almost all the transmission lines over 300 kilometers long were repaired. 502 new transformers were installed. 502. And 2,292 defective transformers replaced. 2,292 defective transformers were replaced. So we obviously had our focus on ensuring the most up-to-date, modern, capable system to help deal with the blackout issue. And as later on in our term, as we were able to really get these things in place, people started saying that they're getting less blackouts or fewer blackouts. And certainly, I don't think people were complaining they're getting 3 blackouts in one day, which is utterly ridiculous, utterly ridiculous. But yeah, so that's one area that we really wanted to focus on. And that's one area where we made a lot of progress. And one of the things we also suggested was that we need to have redundancies. So we put in place a second line connecting Garden of Eden to connecting the Kingston station to the Vreeden Hoop station. So that if there's a problem at Kingston, it does not. You can still rely on a Vreeden Hoop to a certain extent. We also wanted to connect Vreeden Hoop to Garden of Eden with a line there to serve as a backup. And then we also wanted to connect Sophia to Kingston to provide another backup. So what we were trying to do is to provide these types of backups to ensure the system is much more stable and to ensure you have far fewer blackouts. Now that is, I think, very similar to what you're hearing just in a simple video that you heard just now, which is where you're getting a sense of what causes these blackouts. And what we're trying to do is to mitigate all the different possible causes, so that even if you do have a blackout, it's not going to be across the entire system. It's going to be very small, very localized in a very specific area, rather than being all over the place. That's what we really have in mind, and that's why you start to see some progress later on in our term when it comes to blackouts. Now, obviously, the government is not really had the same, obviously it's not the same management, not the same level of focus, I think, on these issues. All the talk is about the gas to shore, hardly any talk about the current system, and so that's why you're seeing all of this nonsense. But more than that, we also recognize that the problems are not just in the Demerara-Berbice interconnected system, which we've talked at length about. There are other problems. There are other problems. So we're going to lean into that in a second. Let's just get this next slide up so we can tie up this issue. We've got former Minister Patterson who made some varied comments. One of the things he said is that we increased capacity by 25%. So the amount of generation that we were generating by 25%. And one of the things he asked is, what's the plan to curb blackouts as we enter the Christmas season? Now, the real concern, I think, as we enter the Christmas season is this. If we're getting blackouts that are this bad, so early in the year, 3 times a day, fairy lights blackout. If we're getting blackouts that are so bad, and we haven't yet hit Christmas season, which is when everybody plugs in the fairy lights and whatnot, what is going to happen at Christmas? That's the concern. If it's bad right now, if it's bad now, what is going to happen at Christmas? And I think it's a very reasonable concern for citizens to have. If it's this bad, what is going to happen at Christmas? It's very, very concerning, viewers. So that's something that we wanted to point out. But that's not the only place that you've seen these types of issues. So let's get the next slide up as we continue the conversation. Now we're going to talk about. Actually, let's get the next slide up after that. Yeah, let's get the next slide up. It'll be up there. There we go, viewers. We've got it. So this is in Mabaruma, where we're indicating to the public that they're reducing it to 16 hours. Well, that's a big reduction from 24 hours. Isn't that? That's a very substantial reduction. And additionally, it'll be a load shedding exercise. So that's pretty rough. Additional blackouts and so on. Additional amounts of time when you're not going to have electricity. Now, we want to highlight this, not just because we want to talk about what's going on with Mabaruma, and we'll get into it, but we have previously mentioned that people in Latam were complaining quite bitterly about their electricity situation. Now, again, we've talked about the Demerara Basin interconnected system and how that costs $80 million every hour that system is down. Now, we've also got what's going on in Latam, what's going on in Mabaruma. So different parts of the country are seeing this, and we've seen other people say that, the Amerindian community is particularly hard hit by a lot of these types of problems. And so we got an honorary MP Ronald Cox from Region 1, I believe. And one of the things he was speaking about regarding this Mabaruma electricity issue, he mentioned that prior to 2015, residents of Mabaruma were getting only 6 hours of electricity, and that has moved up. They were saying that it's reduced to 16 now, but that means it had to be more than 16. So it moved from 6 to 16 at least. I mean, that's a massive improvement in people's lives. One of the other things, what he also mentions is that we established a solar farm in that area. We purchased additional generation set for that area. There was regular maintenance of the generators, and that they held public meetings to make sure citizens were sensitized and so on and so forth. The other thing that he indicates is that the electricity issue in the area can really be addressed if we have a structured, rigid maintenance program. If we have a new generator, which can, again, provide additional, as a redundancy, to provide additional power, provide another option if we need to get power. And then to establish separate areas, some other separate areas that could use their own generators, so that if there's any issue to be, localized to those particular areas and so on, which is in line with what we're saying. It's about, first of all, maintaining the system, but second of all, building in backups, so that even if there's a problem, it's not going to be a catastrophe. That's what we're saying. Even if there's a problem, it need not be a catastrophe. It's just the government seems to be cool with catastrophe. That's what we should say about them. They're cool with catastrophe. If everything falls down, that's perfectly in order, no problem. So we're basically saying that the electricity situation, the blackout situation, has to be dealt with seriously. We have to be serious about what we're doing. We have to be serious about it. We can't just treat it as some afterthought, because it ultimately is impacting so many people's lives. And in the process of impacting so many people's lives, It's actually causing huge damage to the economy, and it makes no sense for us to spend $2 billion on a gas to shore plant and then to neglect the current grid, which is already causing all of these issues. While of course we understand that further power generation is important, while of course we understand that making use of natural gas is important, all well and good, we really want to make clear is that those things are just as important as maintaining and upgrading the current grid. Those things are just as important, because it doesn't make any sense for you to spend all this money on new power generation, and then when it comes to your current situation, you can't get the electricity to people. You just can't get the electricity out to people. That makes no sense. That's the opposite of how this thing should be done. So that's what we want to highlight to you regarding the electricity situation, regarding the government's real failure to have any kind of success on this issue. And it's an issue that we're going to continue to keep highlighting, because we want Guyanese, in the run-up to Christmas, first of all, to be alert to it. But second of all, the government is going to be producing another budget, and we need to see in that budget the types of funds and the type of plan that will now facilitate us getting a better system, a better electricity system for the new year. It's not enough for, as we mentioned, Jagdeo had said last year, oh, we're going to deal with the blackout situation. And then the new year comes and you're still having the same blackout situation. It's not enough for people to say that. It is rather that we need to see progress, rather that we need to see the money set aside. Folks, monies are there. There's $1 billion at least. $1 billion in the Natural Resources Fund. $1 billion. We need to see that money used in the way that it needs to be used, and there's going to be additional funds available next year. We're going to lean into that in just a second. So there's funds available. It's just a question of whether or not we choose to use the funds. It's just a question of whether or not we actually make an effort to use the funds. Though that is what we've got to keep, really in mind. It's not just about having the funds there. We got to make an effort to use those funds and use them in the right way. That's pretty key to the whole thing. So I think citizens' frustration is very understandable. Let's get the next slide up as we continue the conversation and we start to lean a little bit on the issue of oil. So we had mentioned before that the country is going to grow at nearly 60% this year, so really substantial growth. But also we've gotten the first estimates, and that indicates that we should have about 25% growth next year, which is, again, monstrous amount of growth, very high level of growth, and we're going to continue to rank amongst the countries with the fastest growth rate. We've been amongst the countries with the fastest growth rate for several years now. So we're just continuing that trend, keeping that trend going, folks. But we've got to ask ourselves, what is being done with these monies? What is being done with these monies? Are we actually seeing progress for our people? We're talking about all of these monies that are being made, all this growth, $1 billion in the bank account, boom. And yet, blackout nonstop. And it really flies in the face of the idea that Ghana is this big developing country when they can't get the basics right. So that's what we should look forward to in terms of the growth in the economy next year. Let's get some of the other slides up as the next slide as we continue the conversation. So one of the things that we want to also mention here, and this is just an excerpt from an online paper here, that there's a $9 billion audit. A $9 billion audit. We can just push that aside. It's a 4 months time period that was there for the audit. 4 months. And it's $9 billion audit. Now, one of the things that has been said before is that maybe that as much as 10% of this, if anything is going on. Of course, we don't know that anything improper is going on. It could be that as much as 10% of this is being siphoned off through various practices such as transfer pricing and so on. We've talked about that previously on the show, but it's basically where an oil and gas company will establish a bunch of subsidiaries and will give business to its subsidiaries and charge you a higher price, an inflated price. And that way it will actually be able to siphon off more revenue from you. So the audit is supposed to look for those types of things and to pick up those types of expenses. That audit was due at the beginning of October. And the beginning of October is when it's supposed to come out. First is the 22nd of October. It's the 22nd of October. Where's the audit? Where is the audit? Folks, what is going on? This is 9 billion US we're talking about. And we're talking about more than that, about 900 million US that could be at stake. 900 million US that could be at stake. Can you imagine that? Where is the audit, folks? This is not acceptable. This is too much money to be floating in the wind like that. But the audit was supposed to be out at the beginning of this month. Now, we have not seen that audit. It's the 22nd. We're coming to the end of the month. What is going on, folks? What is going on? This is not acceptable. And many people would know that what actually happened is that the government had allowed the audit time, because there's a specific amount of time that's available for them to actually audit Exxon's expenses. The government had allowed that time to elapse. And so it is after that time when they elapsed that they went back to Exxon to ask them if they would allow them to audit. They had let the time elapse and they were behaving like if it wasn't anything big. This is $9 billion and it's not anything big. That's the type of governance you're looking at on the PVP. That's the type of governance. $9 billion, potentially $900 million that could be lost. We'll have to see. $900 million. And folks are out here saying, oh, it's no big deal. It's all good. Just to give you a sense of it, folks, 900 million US can give every single household in Guyana $900,000. $900,000. Well, most households, it's every low-income household could get low-income, but also I think middle-income people. Only the wealthiest really would be excluded. $900,000 per household. That's what we're talking about. And they're operating very casually. Oh, audit. You don't need an audit. You don't need to check and see if the expenses that you're being charged by Exxon for your actual oil production are in actual fact expenses, in actual fact true expenses. Oh, you don't need to check for that. You don't need to know that. Let's just roll with it. Whatever happen. Meanwhile, $900 million is on the line, which is enough to give pretty much every household in this country $900,000 per household. Folks, we need to see the audit. We need people to talk about the audit. And we need the government to be under pressure to release said audit. This is not acceptable. It's been nearly a month and we've not seen anything. This is highly, highly, highly concerning, and we need to see that out there, folks. Need to see it out there. Folks, as we continue the conversation, we wanna just pivot a little bit and give it the next slide here as we kind of talk a bit more about, some of the policies that the coalition wants to put forward. So what are the first thoughts that come to mind when you see this? You've got several things going on there, viewers. If you could take a close look at it, I'm sure you can see several. First of all, you've got a child there walking in the water, which looks to me to be dirty water. That's one thing. A school child as well is another thing. You've got as well a house that looks. You've got some children within the school, within the house as well. They're looking out. You've got an extremely, extremely decrepit area there, where the house really looks like it's about to fall into the water. It is extremely old as well. It's a house that looks like it's from colonial times, given the style. You've got rotting wood and so on there. Extreme level of poverty, really. And this is not a sight I think many of you would be too surprised by in Guyana. So the question that comes to mind when you look at something like this is, are we taking the steps as a nation? Are we taking the steps as a country to ensure that we don't see these types of things around our country? Whether it is in town, whether it's out of town, whether it's in Bordeaux, whether it's in Essequibo, whether it's in Demerara, whether it's in Lene, whether it's in Letem, are we taking the types of steps? Are we taking the types of steps to deal with poverty in this country the way that it needs to be dealt with? Just imagine that this little girl has to walk home in this kind of water, filthy water. Look at the color of the water. Just imagine that she has to walk home in that. You don't even know what is in that water, and she has to walk home in that. But this is the type of thing that in Guyana you see a lot of. There was recently a story about some Amerindian children who had to walk through water in order to get to school. Are we really going to allow things to be like this? Is this really the country that we want? We in the PNCR have put forward several proposals to combat these types of problems, to deal with these types of things. Whether it's a salary top up so that every month you're getting something on top of your wages, whether it's getting rid of income tax for people who are lower income earners, because there's no reason you should be paying tax if you're not making much money yourself, whether it is stipends for students so that while you're studying and so on, you're getting something to help you through that period to keep you going to study to further your education. We've talked about these things because we care about poverty. We care about inequality. And we see these things in our community and have decided that something needs to be done about them. We've even talked about community redevelopment, where we spend money to build up these communities, employ local people in the communities to weed them and keep them in a good state, and build out the infrastructure and so on. We've talked about all of these things. Why? It's not just that we just we just talking for the sake of talking. These things are important. These things matter, and we care about them. Let's get that picture up again, folks. Let's look at it again. Let's internalize that this image is something that you would not be surprised to see in many parts of our country. In many parts of our country, you would not be surprised to see this. How is it that we are allowing this to happen? How is it that we're allowing this to happen? Folks, this country grew nearly 60% this year, nearly 60% this year. And next year is going to grow another 25, 26%. Folks, what is the point of all of that growth? What is the point of all of that growth if people have to live like this? What is the point of it? That's the function of the growth, that you grow and you make all this money and then people have to live like this. Got $1 billion, $1 billion US in the bank account sitting down there, and people have to live like this. And like I said, this is not a sight you'd be surprised to see in many parts of our country. Many parts. I think you can name a place in all the different regions where you would not be surprised to see something like this. This is acceptable. This is the type of Ghana we want. But unfortunately, that's the type of Ghana you see in so many different places. You go into, recently we had a walkabout in Sapphire, you go into that area. A lot of houses in a bad state, the road in an absolutely unbelievable state, but you're going to see more of that. We're going to highlight these things. The trench, they're not being cleaned. The trench, so the grass is taller than me and I'm 6 feet tall. The really ridiculous things that you're seeing in the country. We believe that this is not acceptable. Not acceptable. And that's why we're putting forward these types of solutions. That's why we talked about how we're going to bring down the price of fuel and the price of food in this country. That's why we've talked about how much the government needs to spend for the cost of living crisis. That's why we've talked about school children getting nutritious meals throughout the day, nutritious meals. That's why we've talked about people getting grants to start businesses, build out their businesses, expand their current businesses. That's why we're talking about these things, because we see that the country is not heading in a direction where people are really going to be benefiting. And I'll tell you something that's a simple thing. One of the things that we spoke about in the last press conference is that the mere act of moving the pipeline from Clonbrook to Wales, the mere act of moving the pipeline from Clonbrook to Wales, that one act cost the Guyanese people an extra $120 million, which could easily get almost every household in this country $100,000 to deal with the cost of living crisis. So the mere act of moving the pipeline, of not following the feasibility study, of governing the project poorly, has cost the country $100 million. Simple as that, $100 million. Folks, it's not $100 million Ghanaian dollars too. Let me point that out. It's $100 million US. Folks, we in the PNCR believe that this is not the way to go. Believe that this is never going to be acceptable. And that's why we're proposing these types of policies. That's why we've got to focus on dealing with poverty. That's why we recognize that so much needs to be done. When we're talking about school children getting nutritious meals, the government brought back a policy when they started to do school feeding policy that we had put in place. But we want to take it much further than that because we recognize a lot of children go hungry. Even at that last press conference, you heard Miss Adam Harris talk about a particular school where he knows that there's quite a lot of hungry children. Quite a lot of hungry children. We must not have hungry children in a country that is wealthy. We've said to you before, Guyana is wealthy. Second most barrels of oil per person. Second most barrels of oil per person in the whole world. And school children are going to school hungry. That is not going to fly. It's not acceptable. We're talking about these things because they're important, and we're going to deal with them. So, folks, we're asking for your support in helping us to deal with these issues, asking for your support. Because obviously we can't deal with them without your support. But we just want to highlight that to you for you to get a sense of some of the issues. I know that you're aware of these issues. I know that you've seen things like this all over the country. I know that this is the lived experience of many of you. But this is what we want to be talking about because it is the furthest thing from acceptable. It is the furthest thing from acceptable. But it would seem that the government has little interest in these types of things. We talked about the cost of living crisis. They passed a whole new supplemental budget of $4 to $5 billion. A whole lot of supplemental budget. And there was almost nothing in there for cost of living mitigation. Almost nothing in there. So they had an opportunity to deal with it. They don't care about poverty and suffering. Their policies are not geared towards that. Our policies specifically target that, are focused on that. And as a result, are the type of policies that will have a really positive impact on so many Guyanese people's life. So from that perspective, we ask you again for your support. We ask you to talk about these things. And we ask you to really convey to others that this is what the PNCR, one of the key areas the PNCR is focused on, because it is the furthest thing from acceptable that Guyana be wealthy, but its people be poor. On that note, folks, thank you for tuning in to Lowdown. Always good to have you here. Always good to have you on. And we'll catch you again. Remember, we've changed our time. We're going to be Monday evenings from 7 to 8 and Saturday evenings from 7 to 8. However, just note that this Monday we won't have a show. So we'll start from the following week. Thank you, everyone. And we will catch you in the next one.
Thank you for watching our program. See you right back here, same place, same time. And remember, hold the line of battle, comrades. Our victory is sure.